Yeah, and I guess that brings us to the next one, which is around clear and understandable and transparent models. Um, the there's something of a paradox when it comes to complex deep learning models. How do we make AI's decision making process transparent without dumbing it down so much that it loses practical value? But at the same time, making uh, not only traceability um, back through to the data sets to see where unconscious bias may be being implemented, but also uh, in terms of how did it actually, what was the rationale behind arriving at a particular decision? Um, yeah. So talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, and you see some evolution of some tools specifically. There's a new market being created to do this, right? But in reality, what you have, it's sort of this double-edged sword. If it's too transparent, then it's vulnerable to manipulation and exploitation. Right? That's the first thing. But I guess a lot of our transparency now, from a technology point of view, is all around the developer explaining to the end user, typically a business process, uh, how that's used, right? That's a level of sort of transparency about that, right? But now we've sort of got the consumer in the mix, right? Especially if we start using private and public data, it's very consumer focused. And a lot of these AI solutions that are being deployed have a direct relationship to how a consumer interacts with a business, a government agency, any number of different organizations. So I even tell business leaders that they need to think about um, being mindful of the existing and upcoming legislation that will eventually arrive, so that you think about how your transparency model provides enough evidence on how they work, but also how they avoid mistakes, right? Because the two questions you're going to get is, I understand how it works, but what are you doing as the custodian of that to help it avoid mistakes, right? That can be human in the loop, that can be human oversight, that can be checks and balances and validations. Um, I've seen a lot of models where, as it determines an answer, it tells you. You click a twisty and it tells you how it came up with that answer, right? And what sources of truth it used, whether they're public or private, whether they're commercially and confident information to that organization. So there's ways to go around this, right? But you sort of got to build it as you go and be mindful about it. This is the one that I think will be the biggest challenge for people that have gone headstrong into AI deployments. And if all of a sudden we have to go back and retrofit a level of transparency that everyone is comfortable with, that meets regulatory requirements or meets privacy and security requirements, that's a lot of work to do rework, right? So
And I guess one that is particularly pertinent to financial institutions, especially if you're starting to substitute AI or algorithms for decision making processes. When it comes to loans, risk management, etc. What are some of the relevant or pertinent points that you would uh, point out in relation to financial institutions and banking and finance and insurance?
yeah, so it's a massive space for them, right? So what they can garner in terms of competitive advantage by doing things quicker for customers, approving loans, unsecured finance, trades, all of those things, is great. But if the model is based on data sources that aren't completely understood, you could see somebody that is getting an unsecured loan of a certain size because even though they don't meet the criteria, fully meet the criteria, right? There'll be something that skews the data in the wrong direction, right? So the challenge for financial services organizations is, yes, you want that competitive speed, but you don't want AI models doing the entire decisioning um, around individuals, right? And that could be decisions you could be. It's very harmful to give somebody a line of credit that is already in financial hardship. Right? But you could also see a model where large volumes of treasury transactions happen through an automated model, um, but when they line up against what the policy of the organization is, or the way they want to trade, or the way they want their treasury to run, there's a gap, right? Um, so this will be a tricky one for financial services to deploy and understand as it evolves. But I think if they get the scaffold right, um, it'll become easier for them in the future.
Yeah, I guess this kind of relates to your particular approach to using AI. So one of the theories, if you like, that I have is that you're going to see the Uberification or the gig economy start to play out in certain professions and roles. And what do I mean by that? Is that you're going to see more and more supervisors of AI. So, there is some discussion around how um, self-driving cars are going to mean that Uber drivers become or taxi drivers become obsolete or truck drivers become obsolete. But the counter argument from technologists is that you're going to see supervised um, operators or self-driving supervisors start to become a role where they're actually managing a fleet of 20 different vehicles. I suspect that what you're going to see um, is a similar sort of application here. Like, do you have any thoughts on how you actually implement a guardrail like this one by making it transparent and understandable to an intermediary that can make it more explainable to the consumer of the decision?
Yeah, you're very right. Some of the job roles around these guardrails are just being scratched out now, or being added as responsibilities to maybe somebody that has data stewardship in an organization. But what will happen in the future is there will be job roles that are just around AI transparency, right? Or AI explainability. Um, Similar to a data steward, um, but more evolved in a sense that it's sort of that one to many concept. You'll have all of these business processes using AI capabilities. Above that is a set of job roles that are loosely aligned to these 10 guardrails, right? Or in terms of job responsibility. So in your example, not driving the Ubers, but making sure that the data that they're using and where they're traveling and all of those things are happening in the same way as envisaged, right? Um, and it becomes more and more important as AI programs and projects. They're not an airlift application deployment. They don't sit for a period of time on the books and depreciate, and so these things evolve over time, right? So the jobs of the future. I think a lot of people are. You see them advertised the early stages of that transition. Um, Data stewardship, AI stewardship, business process owner with respect to AI, these kind of things coming into job ads at some of the bigger organizations and some of the tech firms. You'll see that even in smaller firms, right? Internal IT organizations. So that move away from data governance, data stewardship, sort of dedicated roles, and morphing into this in the same way.
I want to thank Sam and Simon again for today's conversation. Listening to the whole thing together is actually really fascinating, so you get to do that really soon once everything's all uploaded over the next couple of weeks if you want to. In the meantime, enjoy what we've got out there and maybe check out some of the other content that's on the page as well. We'll catch you later. Make sure you look after yourselves, and we'll see you next week.